Hi everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, I hope you had a great holiday and a happy new year to you all. And I just wanted to pop on for a couple minutes today to say hey and to share with you some of the books that I got over the Christmas holidays, and also share with you some of the books that I plan on reading in the month of January. So I'd like to begin with a book that I got in my stocking. So it was a little stocking stuffer. It's really cute, and that is Christmas with LM Montgomery. And of course, LM Montgomery is the author of many children's books and other works as well, and wrote Anne of Green Gables and all of the Avonlea Chronicles. But this is just a tiny little pocket-sized book. I know they have these at Barnes & Noble, and they have them by a lot of authors, but they specify Christmas reads, like little short stories and things. And there's 3 in this volume, and it was thoroughly enjoyable. I loved on Christmas morning just kind of browsing through this. And the 3 stories that are in here are A Christmas Inspiration, A Christmas Mistake, and my favorite, I think, was Christmas at Red Butte. And that was about a girl that's starting to grow up, coming of age. She's lost her parents. The only person she has left is her brother, and he's gone off to search for gold in the gold rush. And so she's trying to help raise other family members and help out where she can, but she's a bit lonely. She's trying to get presents for everybody for Christmas, and they're quite poor. And she's debating whether or not she should sell a locket that contains her brother's lock of hair that he gave her before he went away, and it's a treasured possession. And so this is the story of what happens one Christmas in Red Butte, and it's a really sweet story. So this was just a tiny little stocking stuffer that I enjoyed greatly, and it's Christmas with LM Montgomery. And then I also, in my stocking, was lucky enough to get this tiny little hardcover book. And this is Dorothy Wordsworth's Christmas Birthday by Carol Ann Duffy. And I spoke recently about a book of poetry called To the Moon that was edited by Carol Ann Duffy. And this, I guess she has quite a few of these little special Christmas hardcovers. She came out with one each year, and it's just one poem with some really, really lovely illustrations in here. And so apparently it's Dorothy Wordsworth's birthday on Christmas, and so I'll just read you the little flap here. It is Christmas Eve, 1799, and Dorothy Wordsworth is awake in the dead of night. She stands outside in the winter cold, waiting patiently. When the new day breaks, it will bring family and friends to Dorothy's door. For tomorrow is a double joy. Tomorrow is her Christmas birthday. And so this is a poem by Carol Ann Duffy, and I'll just show you some of the illustrations in here because they're just so lovely. I love the colors. It's sort of Japanese woodblocky looking, and it's a really good poem as well. Here's one of Dorothy walking down the street, and she's wearing her shawl, and she's with Wordsworth, the poet, but then additionally they go and they have a feast, mutton pie, buttered parsnips, and potatoes, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge is their dinner guest. So really cute, sweet little hardcover book, and I'm looking forward to reading some of the other Carol Ann Duffy Christmas books. Another book, or booklet I should say, that I received in my stocking is The Woods in Winter by John Lewis Stemple. And I've spoken recently about John Lewis Stemple. I love his work. I read the book about the 4 walks in the woods and night walking, and a bunch of others. And so this is a very sweet little pamphlet that contains an excerpt from one of his books, and this is about the woods in winter. And what's really nice is it comes with a little bookmark that you can see there. Lovely artwork by Angela Harding. I kind of had Angela Harding Fest this year. This work is by, the cover work is by Angela Harding. And then I also received from my mother-in-law A Year Unfolding, A Printmaker's View. And this is absolutely lovely. Just stunning, stunning illustrations. And it's a collection of Angela Harding's images that have appeared on different book covers and projects. And it shows how she does her work. It shows her process and shows her studio, a little bit about where she lives. And then she gives a little bit of an explanation about how each of her images came to be. So there's some illustrations there. And I believe these are lino cuts. I love lino cuts. I also love hairs. And look at this one. So it takes you through the entire year. So it's a bit almanac-ish in that sense. And that's why it's a year unfolding, and the things that inspire her in the different seasons. So that's kind of neat. And how her process change, how the light changes, so how her subject matter changes, and her interests from season to season as an artist. So I was absolutely thrilled to receive this one. And as well, I got the Angela Harding calendar for 2023. And on the back you can see just sort of a sampling of the images that are included in this. So that's going either in my hallway or my kitchen. I haven't decided which yet. And then I also picked up a copy of this book in my travels. It's called Winter, an Anthology for the Changing Seasons, edited by Melissa Harrison. And that's a really neat cover as well. And this is just sort of a little anthology of poetry and nature writing, primarily nature writing, I think, actually. And, you know, lists and things like that. I've been dipping into it a little bit, and so far I'm really enjoying a piece by Virginia Woolf. It's from Orlando, which was published in 1928, and it's about the Great Frost. And then there's another piece in here by someone called Lucy McRobert, and it's more recent. It's the date they give here is 2016, and it talks about salt marshes and her experience with a hen harrier who's like a phantom on the salt marsh. And one of the things that I find really interesting about it is that as the speaker and the observer, she kind of fades into the background and doesn't matter or mean much, and it becomes all about what she's watching. And I sort of like that perspective. So this is really neat. And apparently there's one of these books for each of the seasons. So I'm looking forward to collecting some more of these. So the next one up would be spring, and I'm looking forward to that as well. So yeah, really pretty. I love the sort of purplish tones on the cover here. And lots of different authors are included in this collection. Some I haven't heard of. Thomas Furley Forster, and there's Patrick Barkham, who I have heard of. Joseph Addison, Julian Beach. I believe these are all British authors, maybe. So I'll be learning quite a bit from this. And then from my son, I received just a stunning gift for Christmas, and perfect for me in the new year. And that is the PaperBlanks notebooks So they look like this. This is the Olive Fairy, and this is fashioned after the color fairy books by Andrew Lang, which have absolutely brilliant covers on them. And so this is a notebook that's kind of, it's using the artwork from that. And I don't know if you can really do it justice in the light, but it's gold gilt, and it's unbelievably beautiful. And so they have end papers, and they're lined. It's a really hefty, good quality, solid notebook. One of the things I love about PaperBlanks notebooks is that they can lie flat, which is great for journaling. So he gave me the Olive Fairy, and then there is also the Violet Fairy, and that one is equally stunning, and this time there's sort of a circular progression of violet fairies around the flower that one of them is holding up, and I believe that's the moon behind it. So are they not just fab? Fab. Love it. And this one is also lined and very heavy duty. So I do a lot of journaling and writing, and they're so pretty I almost hesitate to write in them, but I will. So I got both of those from my son, so thanks again, Ev. And then I picked up a copy of South Riding by Winifred Holtby, and I've always been curious about this particular novel, and I know the Virago Book Club is reading this as their January pick. Now, in my last video, I mistakenly thought that Rumer Godden's In This House of Breed was Virago's January pick, but apparently that was last year's January pick, and they just hadn't updated their website yet. But in any event, this is what they're reading for the month of January, and it's quite a chunky little monkey here, so but it does look intriguing, and I'm also interested in listening to a dramatized version of it that's available on audio. I think it's on Audible, so I'm going to check that out. It says, when Sarah Burton returns to her hometown as headmistress, she is full of ambition, determined to create a successful school and inspire her girls to take all they can from life. But in the aftermath of the First World War, the country is in depression and ideals are hard won. Lydia Hawley, the scholarship girl from the Shacks, is the most brilliant student Sarah has ever taught. But when her mother's health fails, her education must be sacrificed. And then additionally, there's a male interest in this, Robert Karn of Maythorpe Hall, and he stands for everything Sarah despises. So it's a novel about class and class distinction and the changing landscape, the changing values, the role of women after the war and with suffragism and so forth. And also, I believe, focuses on public policy and just how the world after the war was changing, with the lens being this little hamlet of South Riding. So it does sound really, really intriguing, and I am hoping to get to this. If I don't read it for the Virago Book Club this month, then I intend to read it probably in June. I believe that's when the opening of the novel takes place, so that I think that would also probably be a good time to read it. And as she's a headmistress, then of course it will continue into the autumn and the school year. So yeah, and this is a Virago modern classic. And then I also picked up a copy of this vintage book, and I acquired it on eBay at a very reasonable price. It's called A Traveler in Time by Alison Uttley, and it's illustrated by Christine Price. This isn't you know, a first edition or anything like this. I believe it's from the 60s, this copy. 64. The original was from 1939. And I have never read this, but when I saw the cover, I had been researching things about Mary, Queen of Scots, actually, and looking for books on eBay, used books, and this one popped up. And I had a case of deja vu because I can swear I remember this from when I was a child, either on my sister's bookshelf or perhaps on the library bookshelf at my school. And so, but this particular edition is speaking to me for some reason. And this is what it looks like. It's a lovely soft pink cloth. And I don't really know much about it other than there is a little girl named Penelope Taberner Cameron. She's a solitary and sickly child, and her mother sends her to the country away from London. So she's staying at a place called Thacker's, and that's in remote Derbyshire. And Penelope is soon caught up in a new mystery as she finds herself transported at unforeseeable intervals back and forth from modern to Elizabethan times. And she realizes she's in terrible danger and must plot to free Mary, Queen of Scots, from the prison in which Queen Elizabeth has confined her. So it sounds wonderful. It sounds like a magical time slip novel. It involves one of my favorite characters from history, Mary, Queen of Scots, and a little girl who's in the English countryside. So it has a lot of the things I love in it. And so I'm hoping to really enjoy this one, and I'll let you know what I think of it. And I think it does maybe start out in January. I could be wrong about that. Let me see if I can find, I don't know. I don't know when it begins, but it sounds really cool, and it's one that has slipped my radar until now. So I'll let you know how it is. And then there's a couple favorites of mine, some vintage children's books that I've recently been pulling down from my shelves. At this time of year especially, they seem to be appropriate with the January wind and snow and mud. And so the first of those is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I absolutely love this edition. It's with illustrations by Tasha Tudor, and I adore Tasha Tudor. She's one of my favorite illustrators. So, oh, just beautiful, beautiful illustrations in this. Very soft and just lovely looking. And so, of course, this is a perfect book for this time of year. It's about little Sarah Crewe, and her father, Captain Ralph Crewe, is a wealthy English widower, and they live in India. And but Sarah isn't doing well with the weather there, and he thinks she should be in school back in England. And so he takes her there and puts her in Miss Minchin's boarding school for girls in London. And really he dotes on her quite a bit, and he's always giving her fabulous clothes and dolls, and you know, she wants for nothing. And so Miss Minchin and her sister, who run this establishment, this boarding school for young ladies, is also sort of artificially doting on her, but she's actually not a very nice lady. And in the course of the story, little Sarah Crewe's father passes away, and he passes away having lost his fortune. And Miss Minchin changes her attitude toward Sarah when the father has passed away and the money stops coming in, and she becomes wretched, and they force her to live up in a little attic garret at the top of the school, where she looks out over the rooftops of all the other buildings in London. And so this is a story about how Sarah perseveres, and it's a very honest book. One of the things that really amazed me at the time that I read it when I was a little girl is how forward and direct and blunt Sarah is with Miss Minchin and her sister. She basically puts her in her place and tells her what she thinks of her. And she gives references to really horrific events like the use of the guillotine bringing down royalty in the French Revolution, for example. So it's slightly dark, but that's one of the things I love about it, is that Sarah Crewe is such a real little girl. And she decides that even if she's not a princess, she's going to act like a good ruler. And it shows the kindness that she shows to everybody else and how it changes their lives for the better. And one of the things especially that I love about A Little Princess and Sarah Crewe is that with her little garret room up in the attic, there's a secret friend that makes her room. I don't want to give too much away, but there's another person in this, and she doesn't know who it is. But when she goes up to her room, sometimes it's transformed. I always imagine going up to a little attic room and finding it transformed with a roaring fire and a stack of books. And I think it's one of the quintessential best scenes in children's literature that combines a young girl in a private world of books. Really iconic. And it's also ahead of its time for the way Sarah is so kind, accepting, and including of everybody at a time in history when racism, ableism, classism was at an all-time high. So this was a book, Frances Hodgson Burnett was kind of ahead of her time, I think, when she wrote this. So yeah, A Little Princess. I love this book. I'm sorry if the plastic is kind of reflecting in the light here, but. And then another one I've been looking through lately is The Doll's House by Rumer Godden, also with illustrations by Tasha Tudor. Let's see that there. And oh, how I adore this book. It's about Toddy Plantagenet, and she's a little wooden doll, and she belongs to Emily and Charlotte Dane, and life is great. The only thing she doesn't have is a dollhouse. So when the dollhouse finally does arrive, that's when Toddy's problems begin, because there's another doll who's not so nice. Her name is Marchpane, and Marchpane comes to live with them, and she's quite conceited and causes trouble for Toddy and the others. But it's another one that I love reading at this time of year. And I adore miniatures and dollhouses and dolls. And in fact, if you were to see my basement right now, you would see 3 unfinished dollhouses as well as several room boxes. And the problem is it's such an exorbitantly expensive hobby, but I do adore it. So I restore and create little miniature rooms as I can, and love that as a hobby, and have never grown out of my love of dollhouses. And so yeah, the dollhouse. And I just love picking up a book like this when it's cold and dark outside. It's a little bright spot in my reading, and it brings me very fond memories of my youth. And another children's book that I've been perusing again recently is my vintage copy of Julie of the Wolves by Jean Craighead George. But this is about 13-year-old Julie Mayax Capugan, who is an Eskimo girl. And she's sort of caught between the old ways and the new ways of white people, and her tribe want her to marry traditionally and live like an Eskimo and live a very traditional existence. And she has a friend named Amy who lives in San Francisco. She's a pen pal and lives in a beautiful modern house on the hill, and she calls her Julie instead of Mayax. And so Julie sort of runs away from home across the Alaskan tundra to head toward San Francisco to her friend. But she becomes lost, and there's a pack of wolves out on the tundra. And so it becomes a coming of age and survival story, just fantastic in its descriptions and really evocative. And so there's all kinds of scenes out on the snow and the ice and fishing and trying to survive, trying to keep warm, the ability to build a fire. And the author, Jane Craighead George, is one of my favorites. She also wrote another book I adore called My Side of the Mountain. And years ago, I wrote to Jane Craighead George because I wanted to interview her. Unfortunately, I was very saddened to hear that she had passed away. But I was very, very lucky because her nephew, whose name is Charlie Craighead, he's a filmmaker, and he actually received my letter in the post box, and he responded to me. He wrote just a lovely handwritten letter and talked very fondly about his aunt, Jane Craighead George. And he also sent me 2 films that he had helped film and produce, and one of them was The Life of Jane Craighead George. So it was a documentary about her life as an author. And then the other one was about another adventuring woman who lived in the Arctic and was one of the first explorers, female explorers up there. And so that was really neat too. And I'm just looking up her name here, so bear with me. It was called Arctic Dance, The Marty Murray Story, a celebration of the life and times of the mother of American conservation and her fight to protect America's last great wilderness, a film by Bonnie Krebs and Charlie Craighead. There's another book by Jane Craighead George called Charlie's Raven, and that's actually about Charlie Craighead, who wrote me the letter. So I've held on to that letter and those documentary films all these years and really treasure them. I'm pretty sure that Charlie Craighead documentary is out there somewhere, and it's narrated by Harrison Ford. So look for that one as well. A super sweet guy, and so glad that I wrote Jane Craighead George and Julie of the Wolves. It's a great read. And then I've been getting ready to reperuse Agatha Christie's 450 from Paddington, and Miranda Mills of the Comfort Book Club, along with her mom Donna, are reading this month, and so I thought I would follow along and reread it. I did just read this one last year, but it is one of my favorites. I highly, highly enjoy it. It's a Miss Marple mystery, and Miss Marple mysteries are my favorite Agatha Christie's, of course. This is one of the hardcover Collins Crime Club facsimile editions. I have a number of these that I collect. So looking forward to reperusing this. And I will say that, sometimes in England versus the United States, they changed the title. And so it's 450 from Paddington in the British version, but here in the States, this was called What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw, with an exclamation point. And I remember when I was a little girl, my mom had a paperback Fontana copy of What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw, with a really interesting, grotesque illustration on the cover. And it's just so sensational that you, of course, immediately want to peek inside and see what did Mrs. McGillicuddy see. And I'm not going to give too much away because I know Miranda's going to be discussing it in her Comfort Book Club, but it is another one that I'm enjoying this month. And then this is a curious book I found online very inexpensively. It's from Handheld Press, and Handheld Press brings back some old books that have maybe gone out of the public knowledge, old classics and things like that. This is called Jane's Country Year, a novel of 1940s English farming life and a young girl's discovery of the natural world around her. And this is by someone called Malcolm Seville. So there's a lovely illustration there. And similar to A Traveler in Time by Alison Uttley, Jane is apparently feeling sort of sickly and or has come through some sort of illness recently and is sent to the countryside to recuperate. And so she's living on a farm. And so it's sort of like an almanac story in that sense, in that you go through the farming and country year with Jane as she gains her strength back, and you learn about the countryside and all of the little things she does each day. And it just looks charming. I have not read this one yet, but I am hoping it's going to be great. You can see, for example, here's May, and there's Jane in her bed. So neat little illustrations at the beginning of each chapter. Oh, and there's some 3-color prints in here as well, which are really cool. I love the colors. This one says, Jane and Sally went over to the rickyard. The threshing machine was rumbling and shaking. So there's that illustration. So yeah, really looking forward to this one as well, Jane's Country Year. One that I keep next to my bed all the year round is a poetry collection called A Nature Poem for Every Day of the Year, edited by Jane McMorland Hunter. And in past installments of this vlog, you've seen me show you a nature poem for every night of the year. So this is for every day. I think it's a stunning cover. And I really just savor the poetry in here. Take a literary stroll through the changing seasons with this collection. Everything from Wordsworth's Spring Daffodils, Keats' Mists and Yellow Fruitfulness, and a host of other fine poems, old and new. And so it's a lovely escape from the world for a few minutes each day to dip into this and read these poems. And speaking of Miranda and her book club with her mom, this was a recommendation from her on her channel. So if you haven't already, please check out her channel. It's fantastic. And I get quite a few inspirations and recommendations, so I want to make sure I give her her due for all the fine work that she does. This was a great recommendation, Miranda. And then this one I just picked up. It's another sort of seasonal almanac. This is called the Literary Almanac, A Year of Seasonal Reading by Francesca Bowman. And this is kind of a book lover's book. Very sweet little cover there. And so this goes through the calendar year, and it's an almanac for book lovers, and it gives you reading recommendations for every time of the season and year, which is kind of neat. So as you know, this is a reader's almanac with Celeste, so of course I'm interested in that. And she gives you all kinds of little things here, like I'll just look at the very beginning here for January. She talks about The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. And I don't know the connection of that to January, but I'm looking forward to finding out. And all kinds of really sweet illustrations in here as well. So this is another one that would be nice to sort of keep by your bedside table and dip into now and then as well. So Francesca Bowman, and I had not heard of her before either, so I'm curious to see what other books Francesca has as well. And hopefully this will inspire some of my reads as we enter 2023. This next one was also a recommendation. The Wild Isles, an anthology of the best British and Irish nature writing, edited by Patrick Barkham. This is a real doorstopper of a book in terms of size. And again, on the theme of Angela Harding, this is one of her covers. One thing I love about this book is that it does not have that suede feel kind of a cover. It's a very tactile textural linen paper, and it does not have that sort of squeaky, suede feel. It's one of my pet peeves. I think later this year I'm going to do a pet peeves video, not to be negative, but just to sort of laugh about my literary pet peeves or publishing pet peeves. And one of them is those suede covers. I really can't tolerate them. They drive me crazy. But anyways, this has a great cover. The colors are very interesting as well. And this is nature writing. If you look at the little wood blocks inside here, or wood cuts, and it divides it into different themes and sections with readings for the whole year through. And for example, I just flipped open to a passage from Wilding by Isabella Tree. So there's that. So the thing I like about it, I write nature essays myself and have published a few. And always interested in reading the work of others and in honing my craft and learning how to write better and using them as a teaching tool, as well as enjoying them from a literary standpoint and learning more about the natural world. But just look at how many different authors you can be introduced to from this one book, and it just gives you a little sample of each of their writing styles, and looks really lovely, and it's got a nice blue satin bookmark. So I'm very much anticipating this, and I've read some little snippets already. It's got some of my favorites in here: John Clare, Roger Deacon, Tim Dee, Laurie Lee, and my favorite poet probably of all time, Edward Thomas. So yeah, this is a great, great book. And finally, speaking of journals and almanacs and the new year, this is a blank journal to be filled out by you, and it's called A Foot and Lighthearted, a Journal for Mindful Walking. And this was put together by Bonnie Smith Whitehouse. This wasn't very expensive either. It's quite nice. She's a professor of English at Belmont University, and it's basically just a little journal for people who walk. And it's very contemplative and mindful. And she just gives you little prompts. And, you know, I kind of go back and forth on prompts. Sometimes I love prompts when I'm not feeling very inspired or creative, and other times I find them annoying because I just want to write what I want to write or think what I want to think while I'm taking my walk and not be instructed what to think about when I'm taking a walk in the woods. But I think it's a really neat little book, and it's got tons of ideas in it. It's got lots of quotes. And then it just gives you a little task, like let your mind wander, make a list of things you've seen in the neighborhood. Can you find creative connections between pairs of things on the list that may not at first seem related? I thought that was a really neat writing prompt. And so if you're looking to fill the well up and get a little bit of inspiration, I think this would be a great little walking journal to use. So A Foot and Lighthearted, a Journal for Mindful Walking by Bonnie Whitehouse. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed the books that I've listed here. I'm looking forward to making some more vlogs and blogs and posts in the future. I wish you a super happy 2023, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.